Konetchy. And I'm gonna do a little trick my wife told me about. I don't have real great name recognition, and I realize that. So what I'm gonna do is several times during my speech, I'm just gonna say my name, Pete Konetchy, because I want you guys to remember me. First of all, I'm obviously a candidate for the United States Senate seat. It's currently held by Debbie Stabenow.
We like you.
I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Massachusetts. I came to Michigan when I was 14. A little bit after that, I went to Michigan State University and I got a degree in accounting. I'm a proud Spartan. And right out there, I lose most of my audience here, but I am a very proud Spartan. Right after that, I started my own business. We provide software to lawyers throughout the nation. So I'm not a lawyer, but we do time billing accounting packages for, primarily Michigan, but now all across the nation. I'm also a constitutional conservative, which means that when I read the Constitution, I see the very specific duties that are allocated to the federal government. And I think that the federal government should be limited to those duties only and nothing more. Right now, they've greatly overstepped their authority, and the challenge is to bring them back to that authority only. Again, I'm Pete Konetchy. I want you to remember that name. But the biggest problem that I see with the government, it's really twofold, but they're very much related. One is, as some of the other people said, it's the uncontrollable spending of the federal government, unsustainable spending. But the other problem that's directly related to it is the complete lack of any constitutional restraint whatsoever on the part of the federal government. The only reason that we're in the mess that we have now with the Obamacare, with the Department of Energy, Education, and so forth and so on, is because the federal government just ignores any of their constitutional restraint. I was looking at a graph of spending, and it was federal spending as a percent of gross domestic product. And if you go through the first 150 years of this nation's experience, when the government more or less recognized and respected their constitutional restraint, federal spending was well less than 5% of gross domestic product. It averaged right around 2 to 3%. In our generation, basically, from the 1930s forward, the government kind of figured out that they were a little smarter than the free enterprise system and smarter than the founders. And they said that we're going to start spending taxpayers' money to try and solve our economic problems. And it was a great, great mistake. So now spending has risen to 25% of gross domestic product. From every graph that I've seen, it's almost impossible to get more than 20% of revenue. 20% of gross domestic product is revenue. So if we're spending 25% of gross domestic product, we're going to have deficits as far as the eye can see, which is what's happening. What I want to do is two things. First, when I look at the Constitution, I see, really, when the Constitution was established, the founders set up a sovereign nation. That was the first and foremost function. And then once the sovereign nation was established, the Constitution gave powers to the federal government, but the main powers that they gave were common defense. That was first and foremost. Second, it was immigration to control the borders, and then there were other functions. But there was no function in the Constitution that allowed the federal government to micromanage the lives of the everyday people. And now that's just gone out the door. So when I look at spending from the federal government, what I do is I say, what's constitutionally mandated? And primarily it's defense. Everything else is, very, very minor. Then what's not constitutionally mandated? And that's about 80% of the budget. That's the Department of Education. It's all entitlements. It's Social Security, Medicare, and everything else that's not specifically in the Constitution. So if we're going to survive as a nation, and we have to survive as a nation, we have to scale back the function and responsibility of the federal government to the constitutionally enumerated powers, exactly as it was for the first 150 years of our existence. And hopefully the last 80 years will be an unpleasant blip in history. But what I would propose is the following. First of all, Social Security is totally unsustainable. It cannot, maintain its current, course. When it was initially established, there were like 16 workers for every retiree. Now it's down to 3 workers for every retiree, and in a few years it's going to be 2 workers for every retiree. There's no way we can sustain it. There's a little town in Texas, it's called Galveston, Texas. And back in the 1980s, they were able to opt out of Social Security. So they set up their own program. And when they set up this program, it was not a pay-as-you-go retirement program, it was more or less a banking program. And the people who worked, they took the same percentage of money that they would have paid into the Social Security system, and they put it into this privatized system that Galveston set up. Well, the nice thing about that is, first of all, when they retire, they get between 50% more money if you're on the very low end of the scale, or 300% more money if you're earning $50,000 or $60,000 and you put that money in. The other thing is it's a bank account for them, so when they pass on, any money that's left over in their account can be passed on to their heirs, which is great. So it's not like Social Security is a holy grail, because there are alternatives, and it can be handled much, much better through the private sector. So what I would propose is one thing. I would say that we need to phase out in an orderly manner over time government influence in the Social Security system. And the way that I would do that is as follows. It's kind of like what Ronald Reagan proposed when he was president. Anyone who's currently retired, the government has to maintain their obligation. They have to honor that obligation to pay the benefits. People had to pay Social Security taxes. If they didn't, they went to jail. So you can't just cut benefits to current retirees. People who haven't yet entered the workforce should be allowed to choose their own retirement program, just like Galveston, Texas. They'll be able to do much, much better. People who are currently in the workforce, they should have a choice. The liberals are always, very impressed with choice. As long as, if it's with the abortion, they want choice, but if it's with anything else, they don't want choice. But if people are currently working, they should have a choice as to whether they want to stay in the Social Security program or whether they want to get out. Okay, I have only 1 minute left. So, my name's Pete Konetchy. Okay, the big thing is, the long and the short of it is, Social Security has to be phased out and there has to be a choice. Okay, the other thing is when we have to balance the budget immediately. People say we can't balance the budget immediately. Well, we can. What I would do to balance the budget is I would say let's pay for all of the constitutionally mandated programs, which is defense, immigration, the justice system, and so forth and so on. 30 seconds. Okay, but then what I would do is anything that was left over after paying for those constitutionally mandated programs underneath the revenue level, I would take that money and allocate it to all the non-constitutional programs. But then we balance the budget. The next thing, and this is my last point, the next thing is we need to roll back all of the programs that are not authorized under the Constitution. I only have like 15 seconds left. The way I would do that is I would really push for a negative baseline budgeting approach. So for every program that's not constitutionally authorized, I would like to decrease that budget by 10% or whatever the Congress decided. So that over a period of 10 years or whatever, it would go away. Pete Konetchy, thank you very much.